husband said I'd never make it without him. As I sat in our cramped apartment, watching Derek sprawl across our second-hand couch with his beer and remote, those words echoed in my mind like a broken record. The wedding ring on my finger caught the light from my old laptop screen. I was working on a marketing proposal that could change everything, but Derek didn't even glance over. "Still playing with your little projects, Maddie?" he chuckled, eyes glued to the TV. "You know you're just dreaming, right? End of the day, you'll always need me to pay the real bills." I forced a smile, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "This client could be huge, Derek. If I land this—" "When you don't land it," he interrupted, taking another swig. "Remember, I told you so. You're sweet for trying, but let's be realistic here." Something twisted in my chest. Have you ever been with someone who made you feel invisible? That was my life every single day. But what Derek didn't know was that this conversation would be the last time he'd ever speak to me like that. The next few weeks blurred together. Derek's late nights at the office became more frequent. He'd come home smelling like expensive perfume, not the drugstore kind I wore, but something that whispered of money and privilege. I'd catch him texting someone, always angling his phone away from me. I know you've felt it too, that sinking feeling when you know something's wrong, but you're too afraid to confront it. Your gut screams the truth while your heart begs you to ignore it. I chose to ignore it until I couldn't anymore. It was a Friday evening when everything shattered. Derek's phone buzzed on the coffee table while he was in the shower. The message preview lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight at the Ritz. V." My hand shook as I stared at those words. The Ritz. We couldn't even afford dinner at Applebee's, but Derek was meeting someone at the Ritz. Someone who signed their messages with a single letter, like they were too important for full names. "He deserves someone richer than you," I whispered to myself, testing how the words would sound. They tasted like poison. I didn't confront him. Instead, I grabbed my keys and followed him. What would you have done? Part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some innocent explanation. But as I sat in my beaten-up Honda outside the Ritz-Carlton, watching Derek emerge from his car in a suit I'd never seen before, I knew my marriage was over. And then I saw her. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, blonde, draped in designer clothes that probably cost more than our monthly rent. She moved like someone who'd never worried about money a day in her life, never checked her bank balance before buying groceries, never counted coins for gas money. Derek kissed her. Right there in the valet area for everyone to see. He kissed her like she was precious, like she mattered. The way he used to kiss me, back when he still pretended I had value. But what I witnessed next changed everything. As they walked toward the hotel entrance, I heard her laugh, a sound like wind chimes made of crystal, and say, "Daddy's so excited to meet you properly. He thinks you're perfect for the VP position." VP position? Derek was a mid-level analyst. Unless this wasn't just about love. This was about advancement. This was about money and connections and climbing ladders I didn't even know existed. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Did you want to warn me about what I'd find when I got there? Because what waited for me was worse than the affair itself. Derek had been busy. Half our shared belongings were gone. Our joint savings account, emptied. The man who claimed I'd never make it without him had systematically erased me from our life together, leaving just enough to make it look like he was being fair. On our kitchen table sat a note in his handwriting. "Maddie, I found someone who can give me the life I deserve. You're a good person, but we both know you'll never be successful enough for what I need. The apartment lease is in your name now. Good luck. Derek." I stood there holding that note, staring at my reflection in our microwave's dark screen. The woman looking back at me appeared small, defeated, abandoned. But as I studied that reflection longer, something else emerged behind the hurt. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a crystal-clear mind. Derek thought he'd left me with nothing, but he'd actually given me something precious. Freedom. freedom from his condescending comments, his dismissive laughter, his constant reminders that I wasn't enough. I called in sick to my part-time job, ironic since Derek always called it playing office, and spent the day making lists, not of what I'd lost, but what I still had. My laptop, my skills, my contacts from before I'd shrunk myself to fit into Derek's small vision of who I should be. Did you know I used to be the marketing director at Morrison & Associates? Probably not, because I rarely talked about it anymore. Derek had a way of making my past accomplishments feel embarrassing, like bragging. "You gave that up to support me," he'd say whenever I mentioned my old career. "Don't you think it's time to move on from the past?" So I had. I'd taken part-time work, convinced myself I was being a supportive wife. But Madison Carter, the real Madison Carter, she was still in there somewhere. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my old LinkedIn connections. 3 years felt like a lifetime, but names started coming back to me. Sarah Chen at Digital Dynamics, Marcus Webb at Pinnacle Marketing, Riley Chen. God, Riley. My best friend from the agency days, now a partner at Chen Martinez and Associates law firm. My fingers trembled as I typed, "Riley, it's Madison. I know it's been forever, but I could really use a friend right now." She called me within 10 minutes. "Maddie, Jesus, I was just thinking about you. Are you okay? You sound like you've been crying." The concern in her voice broke something open in my chest. When had Derek last spoken to me with that much care? "Derek left me," I said, and the words came pouring out. The affair, the mystery woman, the cleaned-out bank account, everything. Riley was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That bastard." "Maddie, listen to me. You were brilliant before you met him, and you're still brilliant now. He didn't take that away from you." I don't know if I remember how to be that person anymore. She's still there. Trust me. I can hear her in your voice right now. Look, I've got a client situation that might interest you. Hartwell Industries. They're looking for a consulting agency to handle a major rebranding project. $60 million in billings over 2 years. Hartwell. Why did that name sound familiar? "The CEO's daughter just got engaged," Riley continued. "Daddy wants everything perfect for the announcement campaign. They fired their last agency because, quote, they weren't creative enough for our vision." The puzzle pieces clicked together so loudly I almost dropped the phone. Hartwell Industries, V for Vanessa. The rich woman Derek was sleeping with wasn't just wealthy, she was an heiress, and her father was looking for marketing help. "Riley," I said slowly, "what if I told you I might be able to give them something their previous agencies couldn't? Like what? Inside information about what doesn't work." There was a pause. Then Riley laughed, not the delicate wind chime sound of Vanessa Hartwell, but something warm and real and full of mischief. "Madison Carter, I've missed that devious brain of yours. When can you put together a proposal? Would you believe me if I told you that the next 3 days were the most energized I'd felt in years? I barely slept, surviving on coffee and the electric thrill of doing what I was actually good at. My proposal wasn't just professional, it was personal. I knew exactly what the Hartwell family wanted because I'd watched Derek transform himself to get it. They wanted authenticity with Polish, tradition with innovation, someone who understood both the common touch and exclusive luxury, someone who could bridge the gap between old money sensibilities and modern market appeal, someone like me, if I'd been allowed to be myself instead of Derek's diminished version of a wife. The proposal was 60 pages of pure strategic brilliance, if I do say so myself. Charts, mock-ups, demographic analysis, competitor research. Everything Derek had taught me was beneath my notice. I poured into those pages. But the real masterstroke was the cover letter. I didn't mention Derek by name, but I wrote about understanding the complexity of family dynamics in high-profile business relationships and navigating the delicate balance between personal and professional reputation management. Riley hand-delivered it on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled for the following Monday. Just you, I asked Riley. Not your whole firm. They specifically asked for the principal consultant only. Hartwell Sr. was impressed by your, how did he put it, nuanced understanding of discretion in family matters. Discretion. The man had no idea. The Hartwell Industries building was everything I'd expected. Glass and steel reaching toward heaven, marble lobby that echoed with the sound of expensive shoes on expensive floors. I wore my best suit, a navy blue number I'd bought for Derek's company Christmas party 2 years ago. He'd complained it made me look too corporate. Today, it made me look exactly right. Vanessa Hartwell was beautiful in person, even more stunning than she'd appeared outside the Ritz. But there was something fragile about her, like she was performing a role she hadn't quite mastered. When she spoke about the rebranding campaign, her eyes kept darting to her father for approval. We want something that honors our family legacy while positioning us for the next generation, she said, her voice carefully modulated. The engagement announcement needs to reflect both tradition and forward momentum, added Richard Hartwell Sr., a silver-haired man whose presence filled the room. We're not just announcing a personal milestone, but a business evolution. I nodded thoughtfully. And the gentleman she's marrying, is he involved in the business? He will be, Hartwell Sr. said. Derek Mitchell, brilliant analyst, very strategic mind. He'll be joining our executive team after the wedding. The name hung in the air between us. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, even as my pulse hammered against my throat. Did you feel that moment of vertigo when your two worlds suddenly collided? Mitchell, I repeated carefully. Has he been involved in any of the preliminary discussions about brand positioning? Oh, he has wonderful insights about market accessibility, Vanessa chimed in. He understands the middle-class perspective so well. He keeps us grounded, doesn't he, Daddy? Middle-class perspective. Grounded. The way she said it made it clear that Derek's background, our background, was both useful and beneath them. He was the exotic pet they could parade around when they needed to seem relatable. That's invaluable, I agreed. Sometimes the most powerful branding comes from understanding multiple market segments intimately. We talked for another hour. They loved everything. My timeline, my approach, my understanding of their unique position in the market. Yeah, by the time I left, I had a signed contract for $250,000 in consulting fees, with performance bonuses that could double that amount. But more than the money, I had something else. Information. Derek wasn't just cheating on me with a rich woman. He was using our relationship, our shared struggles, our modest apartment, our middle-class reality, as credentials for authenticity. He was packaging our life together and selling it to the Hartwells as proof he could help them connect with regular people. Have you ever felt the exact moment when hurt transforms into something harder and more focused? That's what happened to me in the elevator on my way down from the 53rd floor. Derek thought he'd traded up. He thought he'd found someone better than me, someone worthy of his ambitions. But what he'd actually done was give me the tools to rebuild myself into someone he couldn't even imagine, someone who was about to make his life very, very complicated. I spent the weekend setting up my home office in the corner of my tiny apartment. Every hour I expected Derek to call, to check if I was okay, to at least acknowledge that he'd destroyed our marriage over a text message. But my phone stayed silent. Fine. If he wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd show him what invisible could accomplish. Monday morning, I started work on the Hartwell campaign, but I also started something else, a careful, methodical documentation of Derek's transformation. The lies he'd told about his background, the fictional version of our relationship he'd sold to the Hartwells, the way he was positioning himself as something he'd never been. Derek might have thought he was playing chess, but he'd just walked into a game where I was the only one who could see the whole board, and I had plans he couldn't even comprehend. By Wednesday, I'd identified the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. Derek had told the Hartwells he'd grown up in rural Ohio, the son of a factory worker who'd pulled himself up by his bootstraps. It was a compelling story of American dream achievement. The truth? Derek's father owned 3 car dealerships in suburban Cleveland, and Derek had graduated from private school. I knew because I'd been to their house for Christmas dinner every year until his parents decided I wasn't ambitious enough for their son. But I didn't call him out. Not yet. Instead, I did what Derek had taught me to do, back when he still believed in my abilities. I gathered intelligence, I planned strategy, and I waited for the perfect moment to execute. The moment came sooner than I expected. Riley called me Thursday afternoon, barely containing her excitement. "Maddie, you're not going to believe this. Derek Mitchell, your Derek, he's been calling around town asking questions about your contract with Hartwell." "What kind of questions?" "Whether you have the experience to handle something that big, whether your old references are still valid, whether anyone thinks you might be in over your head." Heat flooded my cheeks. Even now, even after leaving me for another woman, Derek couldn't stand the thought of me succeeding. He was actively trying to sabotage my first real opportunity in years. "There's more," Riley continued. "I have it on good authority that he's planning to suggest to the Hartwells that they bring in his old firm to support your efforts. Naturally, he'd be the primary contact on their end." Of course. Derek couldn't just let me win. He had to insert himself into my victory, make sure he got credit for anything good that came out of it. Even my success had to belong to him somehow. "Riley," I said, my voice deadly calm, "how would you feel about helping me teach someone a lesson about underestimating women?" "Oh, honey," she laughed, "I thought you'd never ask." That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and Derek's note still taped to my refrigerator. "You'll never be successful enough for what I need," I read aloud to my empty apartment. 6 weeks later, I'd signed 3 more clients referred by the Hartwells. My bank account had numbers in it I hadn't seen since my agency days. I'd moved from the cramped apartment to a beautiful 2-bedroom with hardwood floors and a view of the park. And Derek? Derek's carefully constructed new life was about to encounter some complications he hadn't planned for. Because sometimes, the person you underestimate the most is the one who knows all your secrets. And sometimes, the woman you abandon is the one who ends up holding all the cards. The game was just getting started. 3 months after Derek walked out of my life, I stood in the marble lobby of my new office building, watching him through the floor-to-ceiling windows as he paced outside like a caged animal. He'd been calling for weeks, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that I hadn't returned. Today, he'd finally worked up the courage to show up in person. What Derek didn't know was that I'd been expecting this moment since the day I signed the Hartwell contract. Every move I'd made, every decision, every carefully calculated step, it had all been leading to this. You see, I'd learned something valuable during our marriage. Derek was predictable. When threatened, he attacked. When cornered, he tried to charm his way out. When desperate, he made mistakes. And Derek Mitchell was about to become very, very desperate. "Ms. Carter?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "There's a Derek Mitchell here to see you. He says it's urgent." I glanced at my watch. Perfect timing. In exactly 15 minutes, I had a conference call with the Hartwells to present the final campaign materials that would make me officially indispensable to their family empire. "Send him up," I said. Riley looked up from the contracts she was reviewing at my conference table. "You sure about this, Maddie?" I smoothed my charcoal gray designer suit, one of several I'd bought with my first Hartwell payment, and checked my reflection in the chrome surface of my coffee machine. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the defeated creature Derek had left behind. This woman looked like she belonged in boardrooms and corner offices. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Derek stepped off the elevator looking every inch the successful executive he was pretending to be. Expensive suit, Italian leather shoes, gold watch that probably cost more than our old monthly rent. but I could see the tension around his eyes, the way his jaw was clenched just a little too tight. Maddie. His voice was warm, familiar, like we were old friends running into each other at Starbucks. You look incredible. Thank you. You look exactly the same. The subtle dig hit its mark. His smile flickered for just a moment before reassembling itself. I wanted to congratulate you on the Hartwell contract. Really impressive work. I'm sure it is. I gestured to the seating area by the windows. What can I do for you, Derek? He sat down, trying to project casual confidence, but I could see him taking inventory of my office, the expensive furniture, the awards already mounted on the wall, the view of the city skyline that screamed success. I've been thinking about us, he started. Us? I laughed, genuinely amused. There is no us, Derek. You made that very clear in your goodbye note. I made a mistake, Maddie, a huge mistake. What Vanessa and I had, it wasn't real. Not like what you and I had. There it was, the charm offensive, right on schedule. What you and I had, I said carefully, was me making myself smaller so you could feel bigger. That's not love, Derek. That's dysfunction. And that's not fair. Fair? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Was it fair when you cleaned out our joint account? Was it fair when you told the Hartwells I was just your secretary who thought she was important? Was it fair when you spent the last 3 months trying to sabotage my contracts? His face went pale. How did you... No, honey, this is a small industry. When someone starts calling around asking if Madison Carter is reliable enough for major accounts, word gets back to me pretty quickly. Derek's mask slipped completely. This was the man I knew, the one who appeared when things didn't go his way. You don't understand the position I'm in, Maddie. The Hartwells expect certain things. Vanessa's father, Richard Hartwell, is a smart businessman who values results over politics. He's also someone who appreciates honesty about family backgrounds. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Interesting that you told them your father was a factory worker. With the color drained from his face entirely. What are you saying? I'm not saying anything, Derek. I'm stating facts. Your father owns Mitchell Auto Group, 3 dealerships last I checked. You went to Riverside Prep, graduated summa cum laude, had every advantage money could buy. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not exactly the bootstrap narrative you've been selling. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Tell the truth? Why would I need to do that when you're so good at destroying yourself? My phone buzzed. Perfect timing. That's my conference call with the Hartwells, the one where I present the campaign that's going to make their family brand the most recognized name in luxury retail. I stood up. I think we're done here. Maddie, wait. Derek grabbed my wrist. Please, I love you. I want to come home. For just a moment, I felt it. That old familiar pull. The muscle memory of being the woman who would have done anything to hear those words 3 months ago. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth. The home you knew doesn't exist anymore, I said gently, pulling my arm free, and neither does the woman who would have taken you back. After Derek left, I took my conference call and delivered the presentation that would secure my future. The Hartwells loved everything: the campaign concept, the execution timeline, the media buy recommendations. More importantly, they loved that I understood their world in a way that felt authentic rather than studied. Madison, Richard Hartwell said as we wrapped up, I have to ask, how did you develop such insight into family legacy brands? I smiled. Sometimes the best perspective comes from understanding what you're not as much as what you are. That evening, I drove to the address I'd been dreaming about for 2 months. The house sat on a tree-lined street in the city's most prestigious neighborhood. $5 million of brick and bay windows, wraparound porch, and 3-car garage. The realtor was waiting with keys and champagne. Congratulations, Ms. Carter. She's all yours. I walked through rooms that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. hardwood floors that had never been walked on by someone who doubted my dreams, windows that looked out on a future I'd built with my own hands. In the master bedroom, I found myself staring at my reflection in the walk-in closet's mirrored doors. The woman looking back at me wasn't the broken creature Derek had abandoned, wasn't even the determined professional who'd rebuilt her career. This was someone entirely new, someone who'd learned that the only approval that mattered was her own. My phone rang. Riley. How does it feel to be a homeowner? Like I can breathe again, I said honestly. Good, because you're going to need that oxygen. Derek's been busy today. Oh? Word is, he had a very interesting conversation with Vanessa Hartwell about your history together. Apparently, he's concerned that you might not have been entirely transparent about your personal connection to the family. I sank onto the bedroom's built-in bench. He told her we were married. He told her you were obsessed with him, that you took the Hartwell contract as some kind of revenge plot, that your whole successful businesswoman act is just an elaborate way to make him jealous. Heat flooded my face. Even now, even after everything, Derek couldn't let me have this. He had to make my success about him somehow. What did she say? That's the interesting part. According to my source, Vanessa's response was to ask her father to have you investigated. Full background check, financial audit, the works. My heart hammered against my ribs. How long do I have? The investigator starts Monday. I closed my eyes. 3 days to prepare for someone to examine every aspect of my life, looking for evidence that I was exactly what Derek claimed, a spurned wife playing elaborate games. But as I sat there in my empty dream house, something shifted. Let them investigate. Let them dig into my background, my finances, my motivations. They wouldn't find a woman obsessed with her ex-husband. They'd find someone who'd built something real. The investigation took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of forensic accountants examining my business records, background checkers interviewing my clients, private investigators tracking my movements. It was invasive and humiliating and exactly the kind of thing Derek would orchestrate. What they found surprised everyone, including me. My business wasn't just successful, it was exemplary. My clients didn't just like my work, they were referring me to their networks. The contracts I'd signed weren't just lucrative, they were building towards something sustainable and significant. More importantly, they found no evidence of the obsessive, manipulative woman Derek had described. Instead, they found tax records showing I'd been supporting Derek financially for most of our marriage. They found performance reviews from my old job showing I'd been consistently rated as their top performer. They found a trail of professional references that painted a picture of someone who'd sacrificed her own career advancement to be a supportive spouse. The day Richard Hartwell called me into his office, I expected the worst. Instead, I found him sitting across from his daughter, both looking embarrassed. "Madison," he began, "I owe you an apology." "Several apologies," Vanessa added quietly. She looked smaller somehow, less sure of herself than she had during our first meeting. "We allowed personal concerns to interfere with professional judgment," Hartwell continued. "The investigation we ordered was inappropriate and invasive. It was also illuminating." I waited. "Derek Mitchell will no longer be joining our executive team," Vanessa said. "I've ended our engagement." The words hung in the air between us. I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication certainly, but also something unexpected, sympathy. Vanessa Hartwell had loved Derek, or thought she had. Now she was discovering what I'd learned the hard way, that the man she'd fallen for was largely a construction, built to appeal to her specific needs and blind spots. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be," Vanessa replied with a weak smile. "Better to learn now than after the wedding. The investigation didn't just clear you, it revealed some inconsistencies in Derek's background that, well, let's just say honesty is important in our family." Richard Hartwell leaned forward. "Madison, we'd like to expand your role with our company. Not just the rebranding campaign, but ongoing strategic consulting. Full retainer, equity stake, the works. It was everything I dreamed of professionally, more than I dared to hope for when I'd started this journey. There's just one thing, I said carefully. I need to know that you're hiring me for my abilities, not because you feel guilty about what happened. We're hiring you because you're exceptional at what you do, Hartwell said firmly. The investigation proved that. Your work speaks for itself. That weekend, I hired movers to bring my things from the old apartment to the new house. It was a small load. Derek had taken most of our furniture, and I'd replaced very little. But among the boxes was one containing the note he'd left on our kitchen table. You'll never be successful enough for what I need. I held it for a long moment, remembering the woman who'd read those words and believed them. Then I walked to my new kitchen's garbage disposal and fed the note into it, piece by piece. On Sunday afternoon, I was on my front porch directing the placement of new patio furniture when a familiar car pulled up to the curb. Derek's BMW sat there for a long moment, engine running, before he finally turned it off and got out. He looked different, smaller somehow. The expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair unkempt. When he reached the bottom of my porch steps, I could see his eyes were red-rimmed. "Nice house," he said quietly. "Thank you." I heard about the Hartwell contract, the expanded role. Word travels fast. I also heard Vanessa and that we're not. I heard that too. He stood there looking up at me, this man who'd once made me feel like nothing, now reduced to whatever this was. "I ruined everything," he said finally. "No," I said gently. "You revealed everything. There's a difference. I loved you, Maddie. I really did. I know you did, in your way. Can you ever forgive me?" It was the question I'd been expecting, and I'd thought about my answer for weeks. The old me would have said yes immediately, would have found some way to take responsibility for the failure of our marriage, would have made excuses for his choices. But this version of me understood something important. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, and compassion didn't mean accepting someone back into your life. "I forgive you," I said, "but that doesn't change anything between us. We're different people now, Derek. We want different things. We always did, really." He nodded, tears starting to form. "I know, I needed to hear you say that." "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, and meant it. "Just make sure it's something real this time." After he left, I sat on my porch swing, another new purchase, and watched the sun set over my new neighborhood. Tomorrow, I'd start my expanded role with Hartwell Industries. Next month, I'd begin working with 2 other major clients Riley had referred. Next year, if things continued at this pace, I'd be looking at opening my own agency. But tonight, I was just a woman sitting on her own porch, in her own house, built with her own success. A woman who'd learned that the only person who needed to believe in her dreams was herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? I want to hear all about your conversation with Derek." I typed back, "Absolutely, but I'm buying. I have some celebrating to do." As I hit send, I caught my reflection in my phone's dark screen. The woman looking back at me was smiling, not the careful, uncertain smile I'd worn for so many years, but something genuine and confident and entirely my own. Derek had been right about one thing. I would never be successful enough for what he needed, but I was exactly successful enough for what I needed, and that, it turned out, was all that mattered. Inside my beautiful new house, I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to the empty rooms that would soon be filled with the life I was building. "Here's to new beginnings," I said aloud, and to the woman who was always there, just waiting for her chance to shine. The house seemed to echo with possibility, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly home.